So, Dana, thank you for taking some time to talk with us today.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, after nearly 35 years in office, you announced that you're not going to seek re-election. Why?
It's time. I've actually been working for 36 years in the county clerk's office, and I worked for 3.5 years before that in the tax office. So it's been a long time, and I would like to have some free time to do a few other things. I want to spend some time working on national issues with elections, and I'd like to go back to doing international elections work, going to other countries, overseas, witnessing their elections.
And because you've had some history with doing those things, right?
I did. I got to do that before I was able to observe the election in South Africa in 1994, the famous one that was the end of apartheid. And then I spent some time in Kosovo, Sarajevo, and Bangladesh.
So one of the things that I think, though, is interesting about your decision, we'll say to retire then, since knowing how long it's been for you, is that you're not going to finish out your term, though. You're leaving in January. Talk to us about the timing.
Well, yes, and I did dither with it for quite a while. There was a person who is going to be really great at the job who was interested in running. So that was part of the decision making. Also, my husband died about 3.5 years ago, and I'm fortunate enough to have had someone else come into my life, and I would like to spend some time with him. He was more of the reason than anything else in my life, so I'm fortunate in that regard. I didn't think I would ever find that kind of happiness again.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
I'm
you.
certainly happy to hear that for you. Wedding bells, maybe? Are we here?
Well, we talked about it, but we think maybe that's not necessary. We'll see.
Very good. Tell us your time since being elected in 1986. How much or how little have elections changed in Texas?
Oh my gosh, they've changed drastically. In the early days in Travis County, we had a punch card system. And nobody talked about elections, and certainly nobody talked about the security of elections. The big change happened in Bush v. Gore in the year 2000. Suddenly, everybody realized that elections don't just magically happen. They got to see and understand and learn more about what went on behind the scenes. And I think that was the first time when people started really saying, I understand now how it is that when I show up at my polling place, I understand that there's a ballot for me, for my neighborhood, ready for me there, and that's how I get to vote. And then they began to understand how ballots were tallied that night and results got published. And we started a whole another chapter in the world of elections of explaining to voters how to vote, how ballots got tallied, and how results were then presented to the public. It was a wonderful time because in the past, those of us who conducted elections always just sort of fell into the job. And after 2000, there began to be another move throughout the country to educate us, to teach us how to conduct elections and to have new national standards for conducting them. Schools began to develop, especially through Auburn University, to show us how to handle budget and requisitions for buying ballots and all of the things that you need. And more importantly, the equipment for voters to use. How to make it easy, especially for people with disabilities, make it easy for them to cast a ballot that was independent for them. That took off into a whole new world, and everybody began to pay a lot more attention to ballot security and voter independence.
Yeah. I want to take a step back to something you said there. You say a lot of you fell into the job. Do you think you fell into the job of county clerk?
Oh, no, I didn't fall into the job of county clerk, but I did fall into the job of elections. No, I was recruited to run for the office of county clerk by a group of attorneys and real estate folks and title companies because the office was, missing out on modern management. It was still operating in the quill pen era. There were only typewriters there. There were no computers in the county clerk's office in 1987. As a matter of fact, the first computers in that office I brought in, and they were 2 Dell computers. And they were first used by elections, interestingly enough. And then we gradually spread to some other parts of the area, other areas of the office, in trying to keep track with a booming real estate economy that was going on at the time. We had to keep track of how many houses were being bought and sold in a way so that we would avoid real estate fraud.
You know, what other ways do you feel like you've modernized the county clerk's office during your time?
Mm-hmm. Well, I promised when I first took office that we would get rid of the backlogs. Virtually everything that was required to be filed in the county clerk's office back in 1986 and then in part of 1987 was backlogged. So if you were an attorney who was trying to defend somebody who had gotten in trouble, the criminal records were all backlogged by a year and a half. So you had to know what the number was of your case in order to appear before the courts. The county clerk couldn't tell you what it was. That's a lot to put on your defense attorney. And it was the same way in civil cases too. If your business was having a problem, a dispute, you had to manage all of that yourself. As I mentioned, house, when buying and selling a house was deeply backlogged, and so you couldn't find out what your new property was or the ownership of new property, sometimes for months. That is very unsettling, and it caused a problem later on down the road because the tax office was getting information from the county clerk's office about new sales so that they could send the tax bill to the new owner. Well, what happened was that oftentimes the new owner wouldn't get a clean property tax bill until it had already gone delinquent because the county clerk was so delayed sending the appraisal district the new ownership information. And I just felt like that was an awful situation to put a new homeowner in. So that was the main reason I ran for county clerk, was to clean up what we called the deed index. All of the things I promised way back then, to put our records online, to protect private information like Social Security numbers, and to get all of that information cleaned up and current, I've done all that. Most of our records are online, and very shortly all the rest of it will be put online too. So all the promises I made, I've kept. And we've gone just light years ahead in terms of election reform and making sure that voters really get the chance to exercise their right to vote, that they have access to the polls, and that their vote is protected.
You know, I would imagine that coming in during that time, it was overwhelming to take on such big projects, to take on such important projects. Do you think, what was the hardest thing over the years that you've had to overcome?
Well, I remember when I walked into the office that first day, January 1st, I was locked out. The previous county clerk did not like me one little bit. And so I couldn't gain access early at all. And I remember walking in and seeing piles of paperwork everywhere, all kinds of legal documents everywhere. And my first thought was, oh my, I have promised to clean this up, and this is kind of scary. It's like, uh-oh, I can't believe I took this on, because this is a lot of work. And it was. It took about a year, that first year, to clean everything up and bring it up to speed. So within about the first 12 to 14 months, I had the deed index cleaned up and brought up to date. And within a few months after that, then the criminal records and the civil records also were brought up to date. So after that, then it just became the process of trying to get what was back then microfilm records caught up to date, and then bring in new imaging systems so that we could have people be able to look at documents and records and do research on some fascinating documents and research on really old records. And they could do that research from their home once we got computerization and imaging done. So those were the really exciting years when we had some new technology take over. It took a few years to get enough money saved up to be able to commence with those projects. And those were some of the most difficult days, learning all of that new technology. But it was fascinating. I found it deeply interesting. And it was just so wonderful to be able to take, say for example, really old records of when the county was first formed in 1836, birth and death records from the beginning of Travis County, even slaveholder records, to make those available for people who wanted to do research. I thought that was a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, certainly interesting. You've seen so many things happen within these, 36 years that you've been associated with the clerk's office. I mean, we're talking about not only stuff with voting and the boom of Austin, but also marriage equality, different laws of that nature. What has been some of your proudest moments?
Without a doubt, the proudest moment was July 26, 2015, when we were able to issue marriage license to any couple that wanted them. We did 310 marriage licenses on that first day. That was the proudest moment of the entire 36 years. So, and it had been a long time coming. So that was just such a miracle day. There were so many wonderful things. We were open until 10 o'clock that night, doing as many marriage licenses as we possibly could.
Why was that so important?
Well, because everybody's entitled to love in their lives, and it's hard enough to find without introducing additional barriers. So a lot of people with children were able for the first time to present themselves for a marriage license and enjoy the benefits and rights that previously only heterosexual couples had been able to gain from a marriage license. So to see everybody treated equally and freely was so heartwarming.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about elections. You've always been very, very outspoken about Texas laws, particularly Texas election law, and the restrictions that you feel Texas voters have. And yet, those restrictions have allowed you the opportunity to innovate some new things that are examples for the rest of the state, the rest of the country. I mean, you allow voters to input their own information when they're registering to vote in your office, because we don't have online voter registration. You had paper ballots well before the state was mandating them. Do you hope that spirit of innovation is part of your legacy?
Yes, I do, and I believe it will be. What happens with voting systems is that you don't get very many opportunities to replace it. They're expensive. They take a lot of time to train voters to use. So we really only get the chance to have a new voting system once every 15 or 20 years. So they have to last for a little while. The best thing about it is that we get a voting system that's easy for voters to use, but also one that they trust. We were one of the first counties in the United States to get an electronic voting system. But then there grew to be so much criticism of just electronic voting over the years, and especially on the internet, that voters were really demanding an opportunity for some sort of a paper trail or some sort of a paper record that could be audited, a hard artifact. So we went to work trying to give voters what they were asking for, and there was no way to buy a system that offered that service to voters. So I set about pulling together some experts in this field, computer scientists, to develop StarVote, which was a system that not only had the benefit of offering us electronic support, which in our large county we needed, but also gave voters the confidence of having a paper audit trail and be able to offer all of the other benefits that electronic voting offers us, and to do it as quickly as possible. Well, it took several years to design StarVote, and then we finally did get it off the ground and almost to the point where we were ready to build it. And just about that time, two companies came in at the last second and said, okay, Dana, we've got a system that you'll like. We've got a system that's legal to use in the state of Texas. And at that point, we were able to buy the system that we have today. And it meets all the requirements that we had asked of it. We wanted it to be safe and easy for voters to use. We wanted it to be auditable. And we wanted it to be not terribly expensive. These systems always cost several $1 million. So, and we got all of that with the system that we're using today. So I feel sure we're going to probably run through its entire lifetime. So we wanted to make sure that it was sturdy and durable, that it will last for about 15 years. And then the next system we buy will be the next thing that voters want.
Looking back at all of this, at some of this, I mean, the things that you put into place are still going to be well in place years from now.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Including your ability to sit at home or go to the library and pull up and remotely research almost anything you could think of in the county clerk's records. And that's that's so much material. Even cattle brands. And cattle brands are kind of going by the wayside nowadays because so many ranchers use the ear tags or even nowadays implants in their livestock. So we may not see cattle brands so often in the future.
What do you think about the future of elections in Texas, especially looking at SB 1?
I think we have some serious concerns about the future of elections and about everybody being able to have equal access to polling places and to their own ballot. I am worried about the restrictions that the legislature has placed on by-mail voting. I think it is going to be difficult for some people to accommodate the extra requirements for ID numbers that have to now be on not only just applying for a ballot by mail, but also you have to write additional ID requirements on the ballot when you return it back in for it to be counted. So it's a round trip that you have to do with an ID and whatever ID you choose to use, either last 4 digits of your Social Security number or your driver's license number, it must match your record that's on your original voter registration application. Well, if you're like so many of us, you registered perhaps decades ago. I don't remember what number I gave decades ago, but you have to guess correctly. If you guess the wrong number, then your application is going to be rejected. That doesn't seem fair to me when you are a legally qualified voter.
So now I want to ask you about that point, because that's been a real sticking point, I would say, between you and the Secretary of State, who would argue that while it was the language in the original few versions of the bill, what actually passed just said that it had to actually identify the voter, which is why they say, it can be either number. The clerk just has to be able to identify the voter.
That's not correct. What you have to do is, if you send me your driver's license number on your application, and that's the only number you give me, and the only number that I will be able to look up in 2 to 3 weeks, because I don't have the website right now. If that number is in fact the last 4 digits of your Social Security number, it is not a match, and I have to reject your application. That is the law. That is the way it works right now. I don't understand why the Secretary would say something different. Now, what we are telling people to do, and by we I mean as many people as we can get to talk about it, because there's some concern that if election administrators try to tell voters how to get around this problem of second guessing what the match is, that we are then encouraging or promoting by-mail balloting, which this bill has now made against the law, that we will be in danger of a state jail felony.
Well, then I'll say it. Put both the numbers.
Exactly.
Put both the numbers
Thank
on your
you.
application.
I want you to say it often and loudly.
I say it loud and I say it often, for sure. We've said it numerous times.
That's exactly what needs to
right.
happen. It's a very common sense solution.
Yeah.
And I want everybody to tell their friends that that's the solution you need.
Right.
Yes. To quote you, just put both numbers on your application, and then you will have gotten around the silliness of trying to second guess what you wrote on your very first application could have been years ago.
Because part of the problem is there's supposed to be a database where you are able to go online and see all the information. It's just not ready. That's really the problem here.
It is. The database is not ready for 36 of the largest counties in the state. And if the 36 big counties tried to attach ourselves or log into the small database that is created and sits inside the Secretary of State's office, we will overload it and the entire state will crash. So we still don't have a solution. Some legislators are working on that right now, and I hope to hear sometime this afternoon what can be done to speed this up, because we need that database yesterday.
I want to ask you about another section of the law that I think a lot of election officials sort of raised a red flag and were concerned about, and that's the poll watchers. You've been in office for a long time. You've seen people be intimidated,
I have.
at the polls. Are you concerned at all about some of the new rules?
I am very concerned about, it used to be that poll watchers were the eyes and ears of the voters. That is not what we have today. What we have today is partisan disruptors. And this law gives them what's called free movement within the polling place. And even though these partisan disruptors have to go to a training class, and they're supposed to allow the voter to have the privacy of their ballot. They're supposed to be able to mark it without somebody getting over their shoulder. We have found that there's a great difficulty in getting these poll watchers to follow the law and to absolutely, pay attention to what the rules are. I worry about that, and I especially worry for anyone who's in a situation where they're having somebody assist them with the language or assist them with reading. Let's say you're a grandmother and you bring your grandchild in to help you with the ballot. That's a situation that I think will be targeted, and I worry about those circumstances. Elections will continue, and as long as voters vote, which is their job, their responsibility, and their privilege, elections will be fine. I worry about democracy. We've got to stop these attempts to curtail people's right to show up at a polling place and vote. We've got to stop these efforts to curtail the right to vote in ways that are going to be new for the future, that open up the enterprise to persons with disabilities, so that it's easier to vote, not harder. If we don't take that approach, then I do fear for the future of democracy. And the only thing I can say is these do go in waves. Once we gain some benefits and we have some accomplishments, there often is some backlash, and then we come out of the backlash and we gain some more territory again. I hope we will see this forward movement again very soon.
You were worried about these circumstances. It's a pivotal time for elections in Texas, and that's why I think so many people are saying, well, why, Dana? Why January 28th and not, later in November?
Because my one person is not going to make the difference. And because elections has always been a fight. This fight today is not any different than the fight we had in all the past decades to gain access and to gain franchise for all the different groups who have been enabled over the years. And we will have fights in all the years to come to make sure that everybody gets the same fair chance to vote. This is an ongoing thing. And even though it may seem more acute right now, it's always going to be this way. We're always going to have to fight to protect each other and to make sure that everybody gets a free and fair right to vote.
What do you want Travis County voters to know about Rebecca Goudeau, who is going to be coming up under you? She was appointed to finish out the term as county clerk.
Yes, she will be interim appointed county clerk as of February 1st. Becca Guerrero has been in the office working with me for 22 years, and she has worked elections for many of those years. So she knows every nook and cranny of the office. She's very smart and a very caring public servant. So she's going to be an ideal replacement in terms of her competence. And then when we have the election, I am very confident that we're going to elect somebody who is also just dynamite. I really think our new county clerk is going to take over and be terrific for everybody. So I'm looking forward to the future. I don't think we're going to have problems bringing in this county clerk, Rebecca Guerrero, or our next county clerk, and see them be anything less than just terrific.
I feel like you're right on the cusp of announcing an endorsement. I feel like you're right there, but it's fine. We'll wait. We'll wait. Your legacy with Travis County. What do you hope it is? What do you hope people think, and when they reflect upon you and your time, what do you hope that is?
Oh, I hope they saw how much I love voters, how much I love elections, and what a great honor it was for me to serve as their county clerk. This was the best job I could have ever hoped for. I think it was perfect for me, and I was perfect for it. It's just been so wonderful. When I very first ran for this office, I was very young. I was single, I had a mortgage, and I quit my job and was unemployed for 13 months just to try to be county clerk. And I think what happens is that when you roll the dice and you go after something really big, and then you win it, and it turns out to be something even better than you thought it was going to be, I don't know that happens that often in life, but that's what happened to me. What I got was so much better than I ever thought it could be, and I've loved all 36 years.
Yeah. Final message to the voters of Travis County, the people of Travis County. You help more than just voters.
Well, yeah. Oh, the citizens, our business community, and voters. Everybody I've served. It's been such a pleasure. Well, here's what I would say to voters: do not be intimidated. Do not stop voting. Don't stop the fight. Get up and go vote. And I know that sometimes, some years, are harder than others. We all have a lot to do, but don't let them stop you from voting. It's your vote. You take advantage of it. And in terms of the business community, there are always going to be new systems implemented for our lawyers and for all the folks who work here in Travis County. Automation and technology are always going to grow year by year by year. And these offices are going to offer new programs and new ways to assist business. Take advantage of that too. Don't shy away from the new technology. It's there to make the office more accessible for you.
And what about your neighbors? What do you want to say to the people of Austin?
Oh, we can't really shake hands anymore, but bump elbows with your neighbors. Say hello. I really think that with COVID, it's been so difficult to stay in personal contact with each other, but it's that personal contact, I think, that makes us a community. And I would just encourage you to try to still, make that personal contact with the people who, you live next door to, the people you work with. Get outside and walk around.
And would you tell them thank you, though, for electing you for all of these years and giving you the chance to do this job?
Well, by all means, I couldn't have had a happier life without the massive support from voters and pretty much everybody else in Travis County through all the years. I've had so many good teachers who've taught me, better ways to do my job and better ways to explain some of these projects to the community. I'm entirely in their debt for giving me the chance to serve. So yes, by all means, thank you very much for letting me be your county clerk.